Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Muhammad Abduh bin Zunnabli. My metric number is 2021-101541. I am the first presenter for this presentation, and I will begin with 1.0, which is introduction. The reality in Malaysia today is that Muslims have to make two payments, namely the payments of zakat, which is obligatory by religious demands, and also the tax imposed by the authority as national resource. In contrast to non-Muslim, who only have to pay tax just like Muslim. Not to give the impression that all taxes are illegal, but their application and implementation, which is seen as inconsistent, make it a burden on the less fortunate. Zakat is one of the obligation of every Muslim. Zakat can also be stated as the core of wealth for the country and also the Muslim community. It needs to be generated well in accordance with the requirement of the Sharia on it, accordance to its role to stabilize the economy of Muslims themselves. In the Quran, statements on the importance of zakat and salat have been mentioned repeatedly, showing that the two are parallel and interrelated. Even so, in addition to the function of zakat, which is a generator of economic stability, it needs to be seen in a broader context, especially regarding to implementation of zakat in our country. Similarly, with the tax in the country, tax, which are one of the revenue contributors to the country, also need to be refined. The existing method also emulates the role of zakat institution in the Islamic economic system. Some of the existing tax in the country are seen as insignificant and even burdensome, making them need to be refined and scrutinized. Thus, this study of the overview of the implementation of tax and zakat in Malaysia includes every debate and details on related problems, the true meaning of tax and zakat, the differences between the two, the implementation of tax and zakat in Malaysia, and also the solution to problems and issues on the tax and zakat. The problems studied and examined in the writing that covers these two matters, which are tax and zakat, revolve around issues that are seen as very important and significant and need to be resolved. The first problem is on the issue of zakat as a rebate. The reality in that Muslims in Malaysia are required to make two payments, which is tax and zakat, after passing the condition that have been outlined. Even so, tax rebates have been provided by the Malaysia government specifically to zakat payers in Malaysia, but there is an issue regarding the amount of zakat collection between the types of zakat, namely personal income zakat and business income zakat, in obtaining that rebate. Right. Besides, in addition, the problem that arises is about enforcement of the zakat, which leads to the failure of government initiative to weather the effects of the recent pandemic. The government has launched an initiative for zakat payers to encourage them to pay zakat and will be given tax deduction on a scheduled basis, but the amount of payment is seen to be at unsatisfactory level, making it an issue that needs to examine. Alright. Another problem is solved around the effectiveness of zakat and tax distribution in Malaysia. We generally know that this issue is not new, but it is an issue that is quite great to talk about. Although the collection method is constantly improved, it still gives problems to the distribution that is seen as a commensurate with the increase of the less fortunate in this country. This issue has created a misunderstanding in the society. 1.2 Objective of the study. Based on the problem statement, it is the main goal of the study to examine and analyze the extent of effectiveness and measures taken to overcome the problems that arise involving the issue of zakat and taxes in Malaysia. In addition to identifying the causes and problems related to the issue of zakat involving rebates and lack of regulation that leads to the failure of initiative that have been carried out, the effectiveness of the implementation of tax and zakat is also an objective for this study. It's aimed to achieve the main purpose of this writing, which revolves around an overview of the implementation of tax and zakat in Malaysia.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and hello everyone. My name is Amirhuzair and Hasmadi from IC2105B. My metric number is 2021126233, and I'm the second presenter for this group. And now we're going to proceed to the 2.1 definition of zakat and tax. We're going first through the zakat first. In Arabic, zakat means grow, increase and purifying. When a given form of wealth reaches a certain amount or nisab in a certain period, zakat is the amount of money or the type of money taken from it. It must be spent on specific categories in precise ways. As a result, zakat is used to purify Allah's wealth on a spiritual level. Furthermore, some experts believe that paying zakat helps people overcome the negative trait of greed. It is also defined as a tax levied on Muslims in order to collect surplus money or income from the more prosperous segments of society and transfer it to the poor and needy. Zakat is a type of worship with a variety of values such as Hablum Minallah, vertical, and Hablum Minanas, horizontal, as well as ceremonial and social aspects. People who pay zakat on a regular basis strengthen their faith in Allah SWT, develop a feeling of social responsibility, and create social bonds. Meanwhile, the definition of tax is a required fee imposed on a government based on the holdings of a tax base is referred to as taxation. It is a major political and economic issue. States used to charge taxes to raise revenue that would eventually fund administrative and defense costs. They are also used to provide various services and, in the case of authoritarian kings, to cover the cost of the ruler's personal expenses. Modern economists define tax as a government-imposed obligation to pay money in the absence of some concern. The tax is compulsory levied on citizens for the benefit of the state and the general public. Taxpayers will not directly benefit from their contributions because taxes are used to public purposes rather than for personal gain. Both at the national and regional levels, taxation is a source of government funds for development because tax collection is done legitimately and can be enforced. Next, we're going to proceed to 2.2 types of zakat and tax, where there are two forms of zakat: zakat on wealth, which is zakat mal, and zakat on self, zakat fitr. In Ramadan, immediately before the Muslim feast day of Eid Mubarak, self zakat, also known as body zakat, is paid on 1 Shawwal. Zakat on assets, on the other hand, can be paid at any time during the year once the assets have been retained for a year, or known as exit haul. Only 2.5% of zakat assets should exceed the exemption limit or nisab. Zakat on business, zakat on savings, zakat on income, zakat on gold and silver, zakat on crops, zakat on investments, and zakat on employment provident fund or EPF deposits are all examples of zakat on assets. Zakat on riches is a compulsory tax levied on qualified Muslims who have access after covering their basic needs. As the type of taxes are divided into two categories by economists: direct and indirect. Direct taxes are levied directly on individuals to the government, whereas indirect taxes are often a markup on the price of an item or service that is levied by an intermediary and paid to the taxing authorities. Direct taxes include income tax, capital gain tax, and inheritance tax, while the indirect taxes include sales tax, service tax, excise tax, import and export fees, and value-added tax. Tax revenues and non-tax revenues from federal territories are the basic categories of Malaysian federal government revenues, while the direct taxes and indirect taxes are of the two types of tax revenue in Malaysia. For example, for the direct taxes is individuals, corporation, petroleum taxes, withholding, cooperative, and income tax, while the indirect tax like export, import taxes, excise taxes, GST, and SST. The next is 2.3 differences between zakat and tax. There are various distinctions between zakat and tax. As to summarize this, zakat is first and foremost a declaration of a Muslim's allegiance to religious beliefs, while taxation, on the other hand, is a citizen's acceptance of the policies of his country. Second, both the Quran and the Sunnah specify the amount of zakat that need to be paid, while the tax is governed by the state legislation. Third, zakat is only given by and to specified Muslim groups, while taxes are paid by all people regardless of their religious beliefs. The final difference between both is taxes are used to pay for government spending as well as the state economy, social and political objectives. While for the zakat, Muslims who are eligible for zakat are given it when it reaches the rate for the zakat and exceed the specific time. Now we're going through to 3.0 research methodology. In this article, we use the technique of systematic literature evaluate. It is a method for aggregating, reviewing, and comparing a frame of literature, the usage of pre-spatial and set-up methodologies to lessen bias. The rationale, hypothesis, and statistics series strategies are organized before the evaluate and used as a manual for supporting out the process. The goal, as with conventional literature reviews, is to identify, severally appraise, and summarize current proof, approximately, surely describe the problem. We take the preceding observe or article as a reference and rearrange all the additives in order that it turns into whole writing and an issue for the studies we done. All substance that we refer to might be processed, and subsequently the consequences of the will kingdom the definition and associate matters, implementation patterns and problems that arise, and ultimately draw conclusions. So that's all from me. I'm gonna pass this floor to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Auni Binti Zamri. My metric number is 2021-119639. So now, let's proceed with the implementation of Zakat in Malaysia. Malaysia is one of the few countries in Southeast Asia that has its own Zakat system and management. Every region in this country has the jurisdictions to collect and distribute zakat. In Malaysia, the example of zakat institution is Pusat Pungutan Zakat Wilayah Persekutuan, Lembaga Zakat Selangor, Jabatan Zakat Negeri Kedah, and others that operate in all 40 states. These organizations are in charge of promoting, collecting, and distributing zakat in accordance with Sharia. This is viewed to be more convenient for both zakat payers and zakat receivers, since it makes it easier for the former to fulfill their obligations and for the latter to receive a more effective, efficient, and equal distributions. As a result of this aspect, each area's zakat management model has its own policies for determining zakat management. Therefore, it's no surprise that zakat management laws varied by regions. The existence of a variety of zakat management model in each region has resulted in coordination problems between regions. For example, due to difference in the size of the nishab, the classification of assets that must be zakat, and even group users who are entitled to receive zakat. In Malaysia, zakat institutions play a crucial role in reducing poverty, particularly among Malaysia's Muslim populations. And the current state of zakat institution is positive, especially in terms of their collections. The percentage of zakat collected has increased dramatically. For example, from PPZ 9 had an encouraging result in 2020 when zakat collection expanded by 11% to RM768 million from RM537 million in 2019, and it keeps on increasing and able to achieve the RM18 million zakat collection target for 2021 with revenue of above RM8 to 8 million. It is stated that the achievement was the result of ongoing zakat promotions and dakwah activities by all parties, as well as the greater public knowledge of the zakat practice and the various payment channels that have been introduced to make it easier for payers to make payment. For example, through digital zakat counter service, PPZ My Portal, My Zakat applications, My Temu Janji, door-to-door service, and Right to You. As for the implementation of tax in Malaysia, as we all know, many governments around the world mainly rely on tax revenue to pay government expenditure and to support a country's economic development. As a result, paying taxes has become a mandatory requirement of taxpayers' income to the government. The Income Tax Act of 1967 governs the imposition of income tax in Malaysia, and the Inland Revenue Board of Malaysia (IRB) is one of the main revenue collections body for the Ministry of Finance. Furthermore, the IRB will make public rulings and practice notes from time to time to reflect changes in existing tax regulations, particularly following the presentations of the national budget. There are four main categories of revenue for the Malaysian federal government, which is state revenues, non-tax revenue, non-revenue receipt, and revenue from federal territories. The tax revenue can be divided into direct tax and indirect tax that have been present from our group members. The major taxpayers in Malaysia are individual, companies, cooperative, petroleum, withholding, and others. In comparison to the previous year, tax collection in 2021 increased by 70% to nearly RM114 billion. Under the Go Digital for Future Service approach, the IRB has modified its effort to include 28 online tax service and 6 digital applications. The IRB's ability to quickly react to the demand for digitizations have certainly made taxing easiest for all Malaysians. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurul Binti Mohd Yasir. My metric number is 2021-103409. Okay, I will proceed with the issue of implementation of zakat and taxation. Okay, the first issue is rebate for zakat. In Malaysia, Muslim has two obligations, which are obligation to pay zakat when they are fulfilling the nisab and haul. Second, Muslim are obligated to pay taxation as stated in Malaysian law. However, tax rebate are provided by Malaysian government special for the taxpayer who needs to pay zakat. The rebates was eligible to the people who are paying zakat on gold and silver, the zakat on income, zakat on agriculture and others. For the corporation, they need to pay for zakat on business, and the amount of rebate is only restricted to 2.5% towards the aggregate income. However, for the individual taxpayer, zakat is given on actual of the amount expended as tax rebate, subject to the maximum of tax charge. The next issue is scheduled tax deduction, or as known as STD. From the data shown by Lembaga Zakat Selangor, only 160,000 people out of over 2 million people in Selangor paid their zakat to the zakat institution. Even the population in one area is high, but the zakat collection from that population is low relatively. So that in Malaysia, the government provide an initiative to the taxpayer who needs to pay zakat on their employment income. This initiative provides to encourage Muslim taxpayers to make deduction for monthly zakat payment through their employment salary income, or known as schedular tax deduction payment. Next, the issue of distribution of zakat and taxation. In Malaysia, the poverty still happens even though the implementation of zakat collection and distribution are ongoing. All of these issues might cause misunderstanding and dissatisfaction among the zakat payers, and it might lead them to leave the zakat institution and pay the zakat directly to the asnaf by themselves. So that zakat institution should create new ways in distributing zakat and taxation revenue to ensure the issue can be decreased. Zakat institution can change the method of distributing from the short-term benefit to long-term benefit. For the short-term benefit of zakat and tax distribution, it can create dependency of zakat recipient. However, for the long-term benefit of zakat and taxation distribution, it can increase the zakat recipient's standards of living, and it can change the status of the recipient to the zakat contributor. For example, instead of giving money to the needy directly, the zakat institution can try to finance their children's education. As we know, by attending the training center or education center, it would help them to enrich their skill and knowledge for the future employability benefit. In the conclusion, zakat was known as a portion of people's wealth to be shared to the needy. It is a compulsory for Muslims in order to purify their wealth. On the other hand, tax is also known as the compulsory payment, which should be paid by the people to the government based on holdings of a tax base. The tax revenue usually used for the public welfare, and either Muslim or non-Muslim are eligible to feel the benefit of taxation. This paper was detailed about the concept and the type of zakat and taxation. And as we know, the zakat is money taken from the wealth when it reaches nisab and haul, while tax means mandatory payment to the government. For the type of zakat and taxation, zakat has two types, which are zakat on wealth and zakat on self. For the tax, it also has two types, which are direct and indirect tax. Other than that, this paper also have discussed the differences between zakat and taxation in terms of the purpose of paying zakat and tax, the sources in determining zakat and tax amount, and the group that are obligated to pay zakat and tax, and lastly, the distribution of zakat and tax revenue. Then, this paper also have discussed about the practice or implementation of zakat and taxation in Malaysia, and the issue with recommendation regarding the implementation of zakat and taxation. Lastly, I recommend to the parties or institutions involved to promote new initiatives done by zakat institution. The promotion can be in terms of campaign, webinar, seminar and others. The second recommendation is the zakat institution should organize an interview. This way can ensure the eligibility of receiver before receiving zakat. By implementing the ways recommended, it may help in increasing the effectiveness of zakat and tax distribution, and it may lower the issue of poverty in Malaysia. That's all from me. Thank you.